Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. This is Joseph Scarborough. We're going to get started here just shortly in about 4 minutes. And if you would like, there's the handout has been provided down in the handout section. And I'll go ahead and share the agenda on my screen. But just give us a few more minutes and we're going to go ahead and get started shortly. Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started, and I'll go ahead and give the opening remarks for our meeting, and then we'll go ahead and get into our first presentation from the Port of Beaumont. So I'd like to welcome everybody to the August COPRI quarterly meeting that's being held virtually for the first time. My name is Joseph Scarborough, and I'm the committee chair for the Texas chapter of COPRI. This is the first time we've hosted a virtual meeting, so please be patient with us as we use GoToWebinar for the first time. Please be rest assured that we have taken the time to have 2 practice sessions with using GoToWebinar in an effort to have a smooth meeting for our presenters and audience. As with all virtual platforms, there's always seems to be some sort of hiccups from time to time. The local ASCE branch here in Houston has allowed us to use and share their GoToWebinar platform for all of our meetings. We would like to thank the branch for letting us use their platform. You'll notice under the handout sections, you can view the agenda for today's meeting. Also, we have the ability to push out a poll to the audience, so please take time to review the poll and respond. We are trying to gauge everyone's meeting type preference for the fall conference. I'd like to recognize Philip Brackmar and Robin Warwick for their hard work in making this meeting happen for the chapter. Both Philip and Robin serve on the executive committee for the chapter and worked hard to make this meeting a success. Before we get started with the presentations, I'd like to review how the Q&A sessions will go. Once the presentation is complete, the audience will be allowed to send in questions using the questions dialog box on the right side of your screen. The moderator for each presentation will read the questions aloud, and then the presenter will answer the question. We have allowed for about 5 to 10 minutes for Q&A at the end of each presentation. If we need to move on to keep the schedule, we will reserve time for additional questions at the end of the webinar. So if you did not get your question answered, please write it down and ask your question at the end of the webinar. We want to make sure all questions get answered. And with that, we'll get the presentation started, and I will hand things off to Robin Warwick, who will introduce our first speaker.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Robin Warwick. On the Texas COPRI Executive Committee. I'm the Southeast Texas Regional Chair. And I'd like to introduce Brandon Bergeron. which is our first speaker. Mr. Brandon Bergeron is currently serving as the Port of Beaumont's Director of Engineering, where he is responsible for overseeing and coordinating capital projects, major maintenance, and future project development. Mr. Bergeron previously worked as engineering manager for Lanier & Associates with 15 years of experience as an engineering consultant and project manager on a variety of marine terminal projects for public ports and private industry across the Gulf Coast. Upon graduating from college in 2003, he served as an engineering consultant in the New Orleans area, where he was responsible for structural inspections and marine terminals. From 2006 to 2018, he worked as a project engineer and project manager for Lanier & Associates in Beaumont, Texas, on numerous large-scale projects with multiple engineering disciplines, while earning his professional engineering license and eventually serving as the engineer manager of the Civil and Structural Engineering Group for their Beaumont office. As engineering manager, he was responsible for guiding the work of a team of engineers and design staff to ensure consistent quality and standards expected in the public and private industries. Mr. Bergeron is a graduate of Louisiana Tech University with a Bachelor's of Science in Civil Engineering and is registered as a professional engineer in the state of Texas and Louisiana. He is married to his college sweetheart, Veronica, and they have 2 children, Sophie and Evan. With that, I'd like to welcome Brandon.
Thanks, Robin. Welcome, everybody. I'm glad I get to go up first and talk to you guys a little bit about what we're doing here in Beaumont. I just want to give you a heads up. This is going to be a bit of a dry run for me, so I'm fortunate for that. We've got a key workshop with our Board of Commissioners next week, and so you guys get to see this before they do. So I hope you enjoy it. So here at the Port of Beaumont, slogan that we have is propelling growth. That's in part due to the very large propeller that we have at our entrance that was donated to us by one of our shipping companies that frequent us. But it's also, we feel, an appropriate slogan for what we try to do here at the port, always thinking about how we're going to move forward. What I'm going to share with you today is a bit about who we are, what we do, and what our impact is to this region. And I'm also going to go over some of our capital improvement projects that we have as a port, as well as things that we're partnering up with some private industry to do, and some things that we're still trying to pick up the pieces on post Hurricane Harvey. So here at the port, we've got several commodities that we handle. One of those is dry bulk. We have a nearly 14-acre bulk terminal here on the property that handles aggregate for various customers throughout the region. It is run by Vulcan Materials and operated by Kinder Morgan. We also handle bag goods. We have some USDA approved facilities here inside the port, and we actually have a vessel in right now that's going to be exporting some rice as humanitarian aid to a foreign country. We also handle forest products. Primarily right now, we see a large demand for wood pulp. So we handle premium eucalyptus wood pulp from Brazil that comes into the port by ship and then goes out by rail to the Midwest, where it's turned into premium paper products like personal hygiene products. We also handle a large supply of metal articles, mostly pipe due to projects in the region, but we also from time to time share dock space with a neighbor of ours, a steel mill here in town, handling some of their wire spools, and that's what you see in that photo there. We also see a lot of military equipment. There's been a lot on the ground now, and there's more coming. The Port of Beaumont has consistently been ranked as the number one military port in the nation in terms of overall tonnage because of what we load and unload for deployments. And we saw an increase in military equipment cargo last year by over 43%. Another product that's fairly new to what we handle is liquid bulk. We have a public-private partnership with Jefferson Energy through the port's Orange County terminal that you see there in the photo. And we saw an increase in that cargo of over 60% last year due to many of the expansions that that facility has going on right now through that public-private partnership. We also handle a lot of project cargo, in addition to a steady stream of wind energy components. Other recent project cargo that we've handled at the port includes components for facility expansions by Sasol in Lake Charles, Total in Port Arthur, of which there's a unit there shown on that photo on the big roll vessel, We also have handled cargo for the Shell Cracker project in Pennsylvania. It arrived from overseas and then barged out of here through our Ro-Ro dock, down the Sabine Neches, through the Intercoastal Waterway, up the Mississippi, on up the Ohio River to Pennsylvania. And most recently and currently, we are handling project cargo for the ExxonMobil Beaumont refinery's blade expansion. And we've saw an increase of over 65% in that cargo over the last year. Overall, the port has seen an increase of over 14% of tonnage in the last year. And due to the significance of the port and the various facilities within the Port of Beaumont's navigation district, which essentially makes up the entire Neches River, we have been ranked number 4 overall in terms of tonnage by the Corps of Engineers, according to their 2018 tonnage rankings, and we only see that going up. All those slides, and this one included, were prepared by our marketing group. I hope I did a good job of presenting them to you. But this last slide really shows the economic impact to the port in our region. You see a lot of big numbers there. One that jumps out to me the most every time I look at this slide is the over 67,000 jobs in Texas are related to the cargo moving through the port's public and private marine terminals. Coming over to the port from the consulting side of things, working for a lot of private industry now being public industry, just seeing what I'm able to be a part of on the port's team and the projects we do, knowing that it translates directly into revenue and economic impact for our region. That's really been a rewarding aspect of my new role here at the port. So now that you know a little bit about who we are, what we do, and the impact we have, I'm going to transition into what a lot of you are probably interested in as engineers, the projects that we have going on here at the port. I'm going to show you the first slide, and I'll give you a little bit of a legend on what you're looking at here. Every one of the slides that follow, if you look at the upper right corner, you'll see, based on how I've titled the project, whether or not the project's complete, active, pending approval, or a part of our master plan. So for example, this first project I'm going to present to you is our Orange County Terminal Security Center. This project you'll see highlighted in green and underlined mean that it's an active project that is a part of our master plan. This project here, the Orange County Terminal Center, is an important one to us because as we continue to grow that Orange County Terminal with our public-private partnership with Jefferson Energy, this project will allow us to have an enhanced security presence over there. The funding for this project has come through a 2019 Port Security Grant through the Department of Homeland Security that we were awarded. We're going through the NEPA approval process right now. Horizon Environmental Group has been retained as a consultant to assist us through that process. It's currently under preliminary design, and as I was getting ready to give the presentation today, I received the schematic package of drawings for that project, so I look forward to getting into that this afternoon. We will then begin working through final design onto bid and award, where we're going to have some construction support by our architects and engineers on that project. This project's not only a building, which is a little bit new to me working with an architectural firm as the primary consultant, but we've also got a structural canopy adjacent to this building that's going to provide cover from the elements for our security guards and truck cargo coming and going through the main gate. The next project that we're really excited about, which is just on the very early stages of developing, is some south end property of the Port of Beaumont. The port's dissected north and south on the Jefferson County side by Buford Street, which essentially separates the port's secured Marine Transportation Security Act facility from other properties that we have on the south side. A lot of this area is either abandoned or vacant, and we are working through the process of acquiring some of these properties in this area that have been vacant for quite some time. It's quite the legal exercise to go through the process of finding the owners or the owner's heirs to get these properties acquired, but we're slowly and steady getting through that. What's really exciting to us about this project, as you can see by that green shaded area, it's going to allow us to develop a continuous 27 acres of additional open cargo storage on the south end of the port that is outside of our Transportation Security Act facility, which means it's got slightly reduced hindrances to access down there, which opens it up to additional types of cargo that we can handle and store in that area. The next project is within the port secure area, and it is going to be improvements and expansion to some of our existing lots. The lot that you see on the left side of that drawing is our existing lot 5. It's a very old lot here at the port, an asphalt paved lot that has seen continuous issues with drainage and just being damaged by some of the heavy cargo that's stored there and the heavy equipment that we use to load and unload cargo. We plan on resurfacing that lot with roller compacted concrete so that we can improve some resiliency and see additional bearing capacity for cargo in that lot. It will also go through a substantial renovation to subsurface drainage. We estimate that project to be somewhere in the neighborhood of $3 million. On the center right of that image, you'll see a large expansion to an existing concrete paved lot where we're going to take advantage of some of this unused green space at the moment to expand our existing lot 13 by nearly 5 acres. This is going to be adjacent to rail track, which is going to facilitate loading and unloading of cargo direct to rail, which is always a nice thing to have as a port. And we also expect this project to be somewhere in the neighborhood of $3 million. We're currently finalizing the design with Lanier & Associates through paving and drainage, and we hope to award this project later this year and complete sometime mid part of next year. The next project is one that's active, but it's sort of filling an urgent need. It's expanding our existing aging Carroll Street terminal. This facility was built in the 1960s, and what we're doing here is really sort of modernizing the pieces that get touched the most. We plan on revamping the fender system along the front of this dock with more resilient composite fender boards as opposed to the continuously crushed and maintenance headache timber boards that are there now. The sheds are undergoing some roof repairs. We will also be widening some of the shed access doors on the dock side to facilitate entry and exit of cargo handling equipment on that narrow apron. We will also be improving some of the drainage and track access on the back side of that lot that has been silted in and seen some deterioration and damage over time, being adjacent to our busy bulk terminal. We're also going to be doing some testing of the shed floors to verify what the existing bearing capacities are. All of this is in an effort to increase the utilization of these sheds to bring more throughput through the port in this area that has been historically underutilized since the development of some of our newer terminals. And with that will come increased revenue and impact to the region. We are currently undergoing some preliminary engineering, and we've retained our port's engineer of record to assist us with that. But there's other aspects to this project that are going to be happening in the future once we get it officially added to our capital program in the coming days. And the rest of that work and how we schedule it is still to be determined. Next, we've got another project that is on the books to get added to our capital program within the next few days. This is a parking lot just outside of the port's main gate area and outside of our secure fence. Because of the amount of increased cargo we've seen that enters the port by ship but exits by truck, we have seen a lot of backup on some of the public roads leading to the port's main gate. And these roads are immediately adjacent to our Jefferson County Courthouse here in Beaumont. It's visible from the police department, and so it creates some exposure that is unwelcome by all that truck traffic just outside the port gate. So we're looking to shift that traffic in staging area to a location of property that we've acquired, roughly nearly 3 acres or so, pretty close to the port's main gate, that'll allow us to stage trucks there. We're going to be looking into some technological improvements to communicate with those truck drivers. There's also going to be some green space out there. A lot of these truck drivers that frequent the Port of Beaumont travel with pets, so there's going to be an area there for them to get out their trucks, stretch their legs a bit, and use the facilities if they need to. We're hoping it's going to increase some visibility to the port in a positive way when we finish the development of this property by relieving congestion, but also develop in an otherwise unattractive portion of land just outside the port. Another project that is currently on our master plan and is ongoing is the repair and rehabilitation of a deteriorating grain facility here at the port. Immediately adjacent to our Carroll Street wharf, built in the 1960s, is our grain facility. It is aging. It has been awarded funds through our 2019 build grant, and we're hoping to regroup the concept for this project to not only redevelop it as a grain facility, but also look at its potential use in the future as a multi-purpose dock. So we're going to be looking to widen the apron, increase the capacity of the structure for live loads so that it can handle more cargo than just the conveyors and grain that's handled across it historically. The biggest project we have ongoing at the moment is our Main Street Terminal 1 rebuild. We've lost an entire wharf here at the port, roughly 1,200 linear feet of dock collapsed in 2018 or 2011, and it was condemned. So we're going on 9 years without this significant portion of the port being in operation. We awarded the first contract on this project last year. We're roughly a year into Phase A's construction, and it is ongoing by Beaumont contractors out here at the moment. We look to complete the Phase B design and award that project so that it dovetails into the completion of Phase A, and that Phase B portion of the project is being funded by a 2019 build grant that we received in conjunction with the previous mentioned grain dock repair project. Next up, we have a bridge. The port's building bridges, and we mean that pun intended. So what we've got here going on is a bridge that's going to adjoin our immediate waterfront facility near the Carroll Street terminal that I talked about previously with these south end properties. If you remember the project that I first mentioned, developing roughly 27 to 30 acres of final acreage on the south end of the port, this overpass is going to allow cargo traffic to be stored in those areas to bypass several port rail tracks, as well as a very busy public intersection at the corner of Buford and Carroll Streets, and allow that cargo to fly over and get into those south end properties. The bridge has actually been designed for transiting a 54-meter long windmill blade. So things such as light poles and other appurtenances have been located such that it will not be interfered by the swing of that blade as it crosses the bridge. We see a lot of wind energy cargo here at the port, and that size blade, 54 meters, is sort of the sweet spot. And we do store a lot of those on the existing south end lot that you see just to the top of that image. So it was critical that we made sure that that blade could make it across that bridge. This project is currently under construction by Gulf Coast. It was designed in a joint effort by AIA, now Consor, and managed by Lanier & Associates. It was a very long project, ongoing, and we're fortunate enough to have received some TxDOT rider funds for this. We hope that this project would be complete toward the end of next year. I'm going to try to breeze through the rest of these slides. I know I've only got about 5 minutes or so left of my time allotted, but all these projects are excited, and I could talk about each one of these all day. This one is one that we're very excited about wrapping up the design of and getting out to bid. This is going to be a major expansion to the port's rail facilities. It's going to increase our unit train capacity by 2 additional unit trains. So that's roughly 240 extra rail cars are able to be inside of the port for storing and staging cargo. The Port of Beaumont is a convergence of 3 mainline rail carriers, Union Pacific, BNSF, and KCS, all intersect here in Beaumont. And that generates a lot of potential for us for cargo handling from Beaumont elsewhere throughout the country, but it also can create a lot of congestion. And this project's going to aid to relieve a lot of that. We also have a very old, decaying, complicated switching area of the port that is being handled in a multi-stage project to procure, deliver, and install this new puzzle switch to the far east side of the port. We hope that we can bid this project out later this year, but its bid is pending, again, part of that build grant funding. This was another project that fell underneath that, but we're hoping to have it completed by sometime at the end of next year. As anything on the waterfront goes, we've got to do a lot of dredging. We have a contractor on site now that's dredging the port's main docks. They've completed that. They are also dredging a portion of the port that we procured after Hurricane Harvey that had an incredible amount of siltation just on the south side. If you look at that image there, you'll see there's a portion of that color gradient hydrographic survey that's not even shaded. That's because when the tide's low, you'll see birds sitting out there in the river in that spot. So there's a lot of dredging that needs to be done to restore the potential of this facility to handle barge traffic. Our tenant there at the moment is a major industrial fabricator, so they're anxious to get this berth dredge back out so that they can start handling cargo there again. Looking for other ways to expand the port. We're looking into putting in some fabric tension sheds at some strategic locations as business needs deem worthy. But really, it's our wood pulp cargo. We have seen an incredible increase of cargo demand in wood pulp over the last year at the port. Every shed, every piece of covered area at the port contains wood pulp at the moment. And so we've got a few areas that we're looking into putting in a fabric tension building, such as manufactured by companies such as Rub Buildings in the port, so that we can have a quick up and then also portable in the sense that it can be easily taken down and located elsewhere if need be. But the business needs not quite there yet, but we're ready to go with this project should it expand to the point where we need additional under roof space. One of our tenants here at the port is the Army. The 842nd Transportation Battalion is here inside of the port, and we try to keep their grounds looking as nice as we can. One of the north sides of their property or their leased area is experiencing some erosion, which is clogging up some of our ditches and drains here at the port. So we're looking to improve that that bank line there and stabilize it to prevent that erosion and runoff. That's something we're hoping to add to our capital program here coming up soon. Getting in and around the port is important once you're inside the fence, and we've got a road out here that's been patched and paved over and repaired many times over the years. We hope to add a complete resurfacing project to that road here, and when we go through our next budget cycle with the capital program. We're also looking into how we can capitalize with the deepening of the Sabine-Neches ship channel. This ship channel is intended to be dredged to 8 feet deeper over the next 6 years. And so we're trying to get out ahead of that at the port by studying our existing docks, understanding what they're currently able to be dredged to, and trying to understand how we may be able to deepen them with some modification without the reduction of capacity of these wharves. That's a study that is in the very early stages of scope development, and we hope to go out for approval of that project here very soon. We do complete routine 5-year condition surveys at the port. Our last one was completed in late 2018, early 2019. We try to do these every 5 years. We'll probably be coming up on one here sooner than that because we do anticipate going out for a new master plan here pretty soon. And the very first stage of that will be a new 5-year condition survey. And this is a full survey, every component of the port, above and below water, lots, perimeter fencing, mooring on fendering hardware, everything. Nothing gets neglected in this survey because it's a good chance for us to have that 5-year baseline on what needs attention, and we try to knock the necessary repairs out over that 5-year period in between those surveys. Part of our public-private partnership includes development of a pipeline corridor with our tenant on the Orange County Terminal, providing some connectivity to ExxonMobil. This project is active. Our tenant has secured that funding, and we're currently working to do a cross-channel pipeline. All permits have been received, and we look forward to getting this connection underway to hopefully see even more throughput of liquid bulk across the Orange County docks. We are still picking up some of the pieces from Hurricane Harvey. The projects that you see in red there were completed. We had some deterioration of a shoreline near our grain dock. Multiple security cameras, lighting, and sump pumps were destroyed. We also had to do some emergency dredging, but there are still some things that need to be done. We've got a portion of very low-lying rail track at the port that eroded and has been compromised by Harvey. We're working to secure final Corps of Engineer permits for that project so that we can get that out to bid. And we've also got a project underway to restore a shoreline that experienced some deterioration after Harvey. And I've got a few pictures of those projects following. This slide shows photos of what the shoreline looked like pre-Harvey. And I don't know if you can see my cursor there, but the center of this image shows, this is just straight off of Google Earth, shows what the flood waters were like at their highest in Harvey. And you'll see that you can't see anything because it's all underwater. But what's important to notice is just how much of that shoreline was taken away by that current from Harvey. So the rail track that runs right alongside that eroded shoreline has been compromised. And this project will work to restore that. The shoreline that was deteriorated is on a peninsula at the end of our Main Street terminal facility that's currently under repair. Floodwaters got high enough and current rushing around that bend deteriorated some of the riprap that was there previously. This project's going to stabilize that shoreline with a new fabric formed concrete erosion control system to not only restore what we lost, but hopefully also create a more resilient shoreline to prevent further erosion in the future. So that's kind of a whirlwind breeze through of what we've got going on here at the port. I hope you found that interesting. I'll look forward to any questions you might have. If you'd like to reach out to me or the port, you can find us on Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn. I have a LinkedIn account as well, and that's my email address there if you're interested and want to discuss anything that I went over further.
Thank you, Brandon. Thank you, Brandon. What a great presentation and a great name for your presentation too, Propelling Growth. It sure seems like y'all have quite a bit going on there. We still have a few minutes for questions if anyone has any. And if after we move on, if y'all any other questions pop up, y'all can go ahead and submit them and we can try and get them answered at the end. It doesn't appear that we have any, so I'd like to thank Brandon again for the great presentation. And with that, I'll pass it on over to Philip Blackmore to introduce our next meeting presenters.
Great, thanks, Robin. And yeah, Brandon, great presentation. Thank you for sharing that. It looks like lots of interesting things going on. So great to hear about that. So as Robin said, my name is Philip Blackmore, and I'm fortunate today. We actually have two presentations from the Texas General Land Office that I'll be introducing. So I grew up in Texas on the Texas coast, and I have a coastal background, and very fortunate. If you're not aware, the Texas General Land Office has a lot to do with our Texas coastline in protecting, restoring, and enhancing the coastline. So I'm very happy to have their involvement as we have all of these ongoing tropical events and sea level rise and overall climate impacts. It's great to have them working to improve the coast. So our first presentation today is going to be rebuilding the beach at McFaddin National Wildlife Refuge. And we actually have two presenters from GLO that'll be working on this. The first of which is Kelly Brooks. And Kelly is a project manager in the Coastal Erosion Planning and Response Program. Kelly comes from a geology background, but she's been at GLO for 4 years now, and she oversees projects involving coastal restoration of all types. Kelly is actually the project manager for McFaddin, and so she has a great knowledge of the project and has had a lot of involvement in a lot of important projects on the Texas coastline. The second presenter is Jolynn Barclay, and Jolynn is on the construction side. She's a construction manager, and she's been working with the Texas General Land Office Construction Services Division since 2015. Prior to GLO, she worked with a variety of conservation professionals throughout Texas to develop capital improvement projects that broaden access to the outdoors, protect natural resources, and enhance the quality of outdoor experience for people of all ages, abilities, and interests. So Kelly and Jolynn, thank you very much for your time today, and the stage is all yours.
Okay, can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Awesome. All right, good afternoon, everyone. As Philip said, my name's Kelly, and I work at the Texas General Land Office and Coastal Resources. My colleague Jolynn Barclay and I will be presenting a project on restoring a section of shoreline along the McFaddin National Wildlife Refuge. Just to give you all some background, the Texas General Land Office is currently under the leadership of Commissioner George P. Bush. The GLO is the oldest state agency in Texas and is very unique in that the GLO oversees many different types of divisions. The GLO helps fund Texas public schools through the Permanent School Fund, operates the Alamo and archives of land grants that date back to the 16th century, helps provide benefits to Texas veterans through the Veteran Land Bureau, manages state lands through oil and gas and public lands leasing, helps Texans recover from natural disasters such as hurricanes or flooding events, and of course, we manage and protect and restore the vast Texas coast. As Philip said, I'm currently a project manager in coastal resources, and Jolynn is a project manager in construction services. Now, as stewards of the natural resources of Texas, the Coastal Resources Division oversees and implements various programs dedicated to planning, leasing, coordinating, protecting, and funding restoration. These programs focus on master planning in coastal communities, assessing damage post-oil spill, managing beaches and dunes, organizing beach cleanups, monitoring water quality of Texas's recreational beaches, and ensuring federal consistency. So in the CEPRA program, as Philip recently talked about, we oversee, it's our task to actually analyze the shoreline to find erosional hotspots that may threaten public beaches, critical natural resources, coastal development, public infrastructure, and public and private property. And so we implement a lot of projects that look at planning and funding restoration through beach nourishment, shoreline stabilization, habitat restoration and protection, dune restoration, beneficial use of dredged material, structure relocation, and debris removal. And so that brings us to the McFaddin project, and we wanted to choose a project to show you all that presents and illustrates a really good project that shows the efficacy of what restoration can do in one of Texas's most degraded beaches. So why McFaddin? Well, the shoreline of the McFaddin National Wildlife Refuge protects the largest wetland in Texas, which is the Salt Bayou ecosystem. This ecosystem boasts the largest continuous estuarine marsh complex that creates an extremely productive environment for fish and wildlife resources and provides various outdoor recreational opportunities from birding to fishing. One of the best benefits the shoreline and marsh provide is protection of infrastructure directly upland of the marsh. The Corps estimates for every 2.7 meters of marsh, 1 foot of storm surge can be reduced. This area of shoreline has been experiencing dramatic changes due to development, including construction of the GIWW, or that Gulf Intercoastal Waterway, and oil and gas development since the 1830s. This combined with sea level rise and severe disturbances, including tropical storms, hurricanes, and droughts, have led to land subsidence and conversion of marsh to open water. The various storms have eroded the shoreline and reduced the amount of sand, which allows a beach to recover naturally. Erosion rates in this area have been measured to be as high as 17 feet a year. The result, as you can see, is almost little to no beach left, with many outcrops of the underlying Beaumont clay. So in this picture, you can kind of see how the wetland, which is literally where the line of vegetation starts, that is the wetland, and the water is just encroaching into the wetland, and there's little to no beach. And this leads to lots of recreational tourists or fishermen going out there and getting stuck continuously in the Beaumont clay, and us having to, and them losing their vehicles and our vessels, and us having to remove them. This photo does a really great job of showing those clay outcrops and just how severely eroded the beach is in this area. You can see that really thin veneer of sand and then just those giant outcrops of Beaumont clay. So to combat the extreme losses in ecosystem, this group was formed called the Salt Bayou Marsh Work Group, and it includes members from Ducks Unlimited, the Texas General Land Office, Jefferson County, NOAA, Texas Parks and Wildlife Department, Texas Water Development Board, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and of course the refuge system, and then the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. These stakeholders met yearly since 2000 to research and develop the best course of action to restore the ecosystems within the Salt Bayou system. These plans of action include restoring the marsh's freshwater connectivity, and then the final piece is restoring that shoreline, which would provide a final layer of protection to the marsh along 20 miles of shoreline. Now, because 20 miles of restoration of beach nourishment and dune restoration can be extremely ambitious and extremely expensive, we selected a portion of beach for a pilot project that was the most affected by erosion to start with.
All right, Kelly, thanks. So the 3-mile pilot project was completed in May of 2017. It was constructed in a portion of the site that was most prone to erosion. It utilized an offshore paleo channel for the sand source. The basic design was for the dune ridge restoration height to be +8 feet in AVD, and the beach template design used 37 cubic yards per linear foot of beach quality sand. The pilot project took many years of research and planning to design and permit an efficient engineered beach template, find a viable sand source to build it, and align different funding streams to pay for it. The purpose of the pilot project was to investigate and demonstrate the effectiveness of restoring the dune ridge and nourishing the beach. You can go to the next slide. Great. Okay, so an effective beach template was required to restore a sand poor and storm-ravaged shoreline. Hurricanes Rita and Ike had leveled much of the shoreline, as Kelly had said. There were no dunes to speak of, and so it was a degraded ecosystem. A number of alternatives were looked into for the sand source. They included using the sandy banks 20 to 30 miles offshore of the Texas coast, or hydraulically dredging a nearshore sand source, or trucking in sand from an upland sand source. Analysis proved that hydraulically dredging the material from the sand source that was closest to the shore would be the most beneficial option, both financially and environmentally. So geophysical surveys were commissioned in 2015 to seek out offshore sand sources. There's the dredge during the project. So they narrowed it down to a sand source about 1.5 miles offshore, and it was interpreted to be a paleo channel from when sea level was lower than present day. And while paleo channels can be great producers of beach quality sand, they can also contain prehistoric cultural resources that are subject to protection under the federal and state regulations. Kelly, we'll go to the next slide, and I'll let you talk about archaeological monitoring.
Yeah, since the shoreline of McFaddin is a dedicated prehistoric terrestrial site, it's also one of the earliest known and most important sites on the Texas coast for these artifacts. Literally, you can go there on any day, and beach gatherers have been finding prehistoric material forever. And so everyone just always posts stuff along these THC sites, and you can go there yourself and try to find something. So the artifacts recovered include lithic scatters, mammoth tusks, and Clovis points, reflecting both Eastern and Western traditions. The source of material was interpreted to be from that offshore site or somewhere offshore where Paleo-Indian, archaic, and early woodland populations would have occupied in times of lowered sea level. So this historical status resulted in a very vigorous amount of archaeological studies onshore and offshore to ensure no artifacts were harmed during dredging or construction. So these figures kind of show the various levels of monitoring that occurred 24 hours a day. You can see someone actively observing the dredging operations, pedestrian survey, and the type of artifacts that could be recovered, including Clovis points and or teeth of some sort of species, a prehistoric species. And then also those night operations where they got to practice and come up with new inventive ways of trying to find, chert and those lithic artifacts with ultraviolet light. So since we are on a national wildlife refuge, and because we are the stewards of Texas's natural resources, of course, we are very interested in monitoring and protecting are biological resources like species that inhabit the marine environment close to the construction site and also on shore of the construction site. So monitoring also included biological monitoring to ensure any of those living marine animals or species that inhabit the construction area were not harmed or disturbed during construction. This monitoring also allowed us to get ample data that proved habitat restoration can be immediately successful for coastal species. This graphic here shows least tern nest locations, and least terns are a coastal bird. And roughly after a month of placing our beach template, we had upwards of 500 least tern nests. And this activity had not been recorded in this area for, probably since Ike. So here are some of those little baby terns up on the beach. Super cute. Really great sight to see. So, but of course, while this was really welcoming news and something really great to see that habitat restoration works and that species can use this, it also meant that we couldn't plant our newly restored dune until the terns were done nesting. So once the terns were done nesting, and then we actually had some winter weather also complicate things, which was very strange in this upper Texas coastal area. We got to solicit planting roughly 10 months post-placement. So the plants were spaced 2 feet apart in rows of 5 from the foredune up to the dune crest. And composed of a species mix of bitter panicum and sea oats. And because the pilot project was done kind of in the middle of this 20-mile stretch of severely eroded, habitat, and it's very highly inaccessible, we didn't require additional watering or survivability as part of the solicitation. So it was basically just we're going to get it planted and we're going to hope for the best. Jolyn?
So Kelly, sure. So the shoreline, this photo shows the successful plants, both the ones that were planted and the volunteers. And that's the shoreline 1 year after the placement. And we have proto dunes and lots of volunteer plants. By the numbers for the construction, it ended up being about $9.5 million. Mobilization occurred on April 6th of 2017, and it ended on June 2nd was when they demobilized. And the active dredging was very short, only 30 days from about April 13th to May 14th.
So we always want to know, did the design template work? Well, shortly after placement, we actually had a couple of pretty momentous storms make landfall in and around the project area. So shortly a month after placement, Tropical Storm Cindy made landfall right to the east of us in Louisiana, but I mean immediately east of us, I think at Holly Beach. And then shortly after that, of course, Hurricane Harvey made landfall in August. Now, Harvey made landfall in the coastal Bend region and then moved east to the upper coast, where it became largely a watershed in an inundation event with lots of flooding. But anytime we have those kind of flooding events, of course, we have storm surge, and then we have a large amount of water that has to exit that upland area and go back out to sea, which can wreak havoc on any kind of coast. So this gave us some really good, data to see how does our storm actually, how does our template actually recover from these kind of frequency of storms. So we had a tropical storm and we had a hurricane to actually test it against. And this picture is after both events, and you can see that the shoreline held up very well and had enough material to naturally recover. So after the pilot project showed the true benefits beach and dune restoration could have, through for the species and just for storm protection, especially stakeholders made restoring the next 17 miles of shoreline a top priority. And this little graphic down here kind of shows you the pilot project, and on the western side, you see the completed beach, and going into that eastern section where they're completing the beach to kind of show you what this would look like on a 17-mile scale. So restoring 17 miles surely is proving to be an extremely ambitious task. That includes, finding enough funding for the project. We had to find more beach quality sand to complete the project. We had to finalize design for the remaining 17 miles, and we had to amend the current core permit to allow us to obtain more sand offshore and also place the material and do all the biological coordination to make sure we could comply with everything. Stakeholders in these decision-making processes and funding stakeholders, of course, include Jefferson County, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and the McFaddin National Wildlife Refuge, the Texas General Land Office, the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation, the Deepwater Horizon Natural Resource Damage Assessment Trustees, otherwise known as NERDA trustees, and the Restore Council. So this slide gives you a great visual of the upcoming project. You see that red area is a pilot project area that was roughly 3 miles right in the middle of that stretch of 20 miles of beach. And then the yellow areas show the east project area and the west project area, with also that visual of that offshore borrow area, which is 1.5 miles offshore. So roughly 17 miles of shoreline will be restored through Chambers County and Jefferson County right up to High Island or the Galveston County line. So for the next phase, the template was designed to be really dependent on the severity of erosion and the need for habitat restoration. We have that template and that project area divided up into 3 different fill segment areas. So fill segment area 1 and 2 kind of saddle the pilot project, and they are in most need of beach quality sand and habitat restoration. And then fill segment 3 butts up to Texas's Sea Rim State Park. And that area is slightly more stable and does not require as much template. And so fill segments 1 and 2, we're looking at a goal of placing upwards of 40 to 50 cubic yards per linear foot. And then fill segment 3, we have a goal of placing 10 to 20 cubic yards per linear foot. And with that, this project, the pilot project and this upcoming project, it really has taken a lot of work and a lot of people in every organization, federal and state and within the GLO, and, local communities help, and especially Jefferson County, Judge Brannick and team in Jefferson County, Tim Cooper and Douglas Head in the Chenier Plains and McFaddin Refuge System, former project manager on this project, Carla Cartman in Coastal Resources, and of course all the little things that no one sees that are behind the curtain at the GLO, including our procurement directors, contracts management, financial management, our legal heroes, community development recovery, and all of our funding stakeholders that have dedicated funds to ensuring this next 20 miles that everything is going to be restored. And with that, I hand it back over. If anyone has any questions, we're here to take them.
Yeah, Kelly and Jolynn, thank you so much for that. Extremely interesting to hear about and awesome to hear about a project so close to Beaumont up there where we were originally planning on hosting this meeting. Right now, I'm not seeing any questions in the chat box, but please feel free to add some there, and we're happy to try and get those answered for you. If not, we'll go ahead and move on to this next presentation, and then we can always come back at the end there and answer any questions that we have. I think we do have 1 or 2 popping up for our presentation from Brandon at the Port of Beaumont. So we'll get to those after this next presentation. So, all right, well, thanks again, Kelly and Jolynn. And moving on, again, we have 2 presentations today from the Texas General Land Office. So that first presentation looking at a specific project that's there on the northern Texas coast. And then for the second presentation, we're going to take a little bit of a step back and look a little more broad at what the Texas General Land Office is doing at the state level in planning. So this next presentation is titled State Level Resiliency Planning in the Upper Texas Coast. It's going to be presented by Josh Oyer. And Josh works with the Texas General Land Office as a coastal planner focused on the ongoing coordination of the Texas Coastal Resiliency Master Plan. Before joining the Texas General Land Office, Josh served in various roles with the Texas Water Development Board, Texas Parks and Wildlife Department, and the Meadows Center for Water and Environment at Texas State University in San Marcos. So Josh, again, thanks for your time, and it's all yours.
Thank you very much. Just want to be sure everyone can hear me all right and that you're seeing the presentation view of my PowerPoint.
Yep, looks great to me, Josh. Can hear you clear.
Okay, thanks a lot. Appreciate the introduction there. Yeah, I'm Josh Oyer, coastal planner with the General Land Office. Worked with Kelly in the Coastal Resources Division. And so today I'm just going to give you an overview of the ongoing Texas Coastal Resiliency Master Plan, its objectives and components, and then discuss the progress of projects specifically prioritized in the plan in the Upper Coast. Okay, so sorry about the delay there. The Texas Coastal Resiliency Master Plan is the state-led ongoing coastal planning effort in Texas, and the last iteration was issued in March of 2019, with the first one being issued 2 years before that in 2017. As a whole, the plan provides a vision to protect our coastal communities' infrastructure and ecological assets from coastal hazards. The plan offers a nature-based, multiple lines of defense approach through nature-based solutions, as well as structural and non-structural approaches. And once again, kind of emulating that multiple lines of defense approach that the Army Corps of Engineers has popularized. And then through local expertise and stakeholder input from the Technical Advisory Committee, and those are split up regionally. We have different advisory committees per region. 123 Tier 1 projects are recommended for funding and implementation. So we have 3 goals that have served as guides during the ongoing development of our plan. The first being that the GLO uses the plan to identify, select, and fund projects that address the key issues of concern along the coast and assist the GLO with our broader mission of restoring, enhancing, and protecting the Texas coast. Secondly, we want to continue to adapt the resiliency plan to accommodate changing conditions along the coast and the evolving and changing preferences and needs of our citizens in Texas. And third, we will use the plan, and we are continuing to use the plan as a platform to communicate the environmental and economic value of the Texas coast to not only the legislature here in our state, but to state and national audiences as well. And so while the plan is used to help set priorities for GLO funding programs, it's also used to elevate the needs and the priorities of projects that the GLO coastal programs are not necessarily set up to implement. And you can see there on the map on the left, the regional distribution delineation along the Texas coast that we've split up the coast for planning purposes. In terms of the issues of concern, there's 8 of them that our plan addresses that include short-term direct impacts such as storm surge and coastal flooding, as well as long-term or gradual impacts such as erosion, habitat loss, and impacts to water quality and quantity. So all of the actions, strategies, and projects that are recommended by our resiliency plan have been selected based specifically on their ability and efficiency at addressing these issues of concern that have been identified through our planning process and technical reviews that have included close coordination with the Technical Advisory Committee. Looking more at the Technical Advisory Committee, we continue to draw heavily from input from technical advisory committees that are split up by region. And we look to the Technical Advisory Committee to be the local voices for assessing both our coastal vulnerabilities and for evaluating the best solutions. And the technical advisory committees are made up of representatives from other state and federal resource agencies, of course, decision makers at local governments, researchers and experts from universities, nonprofits, engineering firms, and port authorities, and other regional trust foundations and partnerships. And the GLO is continuing to work with the original planning team, the team of consultants that have been on board since the inception of the Resiliency Master Plan, and that includes AECOM, the Hart Research Institute out of Texas A&M Corpus Christi, and Holloway Environmental out of Houston. So while the plan specifically recommends these 123 Tier 1 projects for implementation, we also continue to develop and adapt regional and coast-wide level actions that show where specific types of resiliency strategies are needed along our coasts. So essentially, these action areas are showing what we need to do and where we need to do it. And you can see those on the map on the left. And the project types within the Tier 1 projects that are proposed through the plan, they aim to achieve co-benefits and provide a boost not only to community resiliency, but to ecological health and economic growth as well. And through the development of these regional level actions, we continue to identify vulnerable areas along the coast to understand our needs where we might not have specific projects already identified. So we have a list of projects, but we want to continue to develop these actions and strategies to understand what we need to do, where we need to do it, and how we can build conceptual projects in areas where there are not concepts already there. So the project types recommended through our resiliency plan, they offer a spectrum of nature-based features and green infrastructure to more traditional gray infrastructure type projects, as well as non-structural policies, programs, and studies, back to that multiple lines of defense approach we were talking about. A rough percentage breakdown of the project types in the 2019 plan in the pie chart there shows the most common type of project recommended involves a form of shoreline stabilization, mostly proposed as a form of living shoreline, with 20% of the projects being non-structural policies, programs, procedures, and studies. About 12% include land acquisition components. 11% are focused mainly on habitat restoration. 11% on Rookery Island specific type projects. Only about 7% are focused on traditional gray infrastructure projects. However, we anticipate that portion of the project types will expand in the next iteration. And with oyster reef restoration, beach and dune projects, and hydrologic connectivity projects, that makes up the rest of the project types proposed in the plan. So the GLO has been using the plan to help in setting our internal priorities for our funding programs, such as CEPRA and the Coastal Management Program, but it's also actively been working to help coordinate with local partners across multiple funding streams to prioritize these Tier 1 projects for implementation and best leverage multiple funding sources outside of the GLO as well. So some of the successes internal to GLO funding streams since the release of the 2019 plan include passage of House Bill 6 in the 2019 legislative session that dedicates 2% of hotel occupancy taxes in coastal communities to our CEPRA program. And then the Gulf of Mexico Energy Security Act, GOMESA funds that we use at the GLO to supplement funding for certain aspects of Tier 1 projects. We're seeing an increase of that funding source in this year here. You can see an increase by $30 million from $46 million in 2019 on up to $76 million. So very positive development there. And then through our Community Development Revitalization Division, which is another division in the GLO that's responsible for administering the Community Development Block Grant funds that come from the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. Out of the $4.3 billion mitigation fund that has come to the state, that again the CDR division is administering, we have a subset of that fund that goes to coastal resiliency projects in our Tier 1 list, and we're working through the project selection process right now with that division. So through the 2019 planning process, we conducted some coastal modeling to examine landscape change due to relative sea level rise into the year 2100 that utilized the sea level affecting marshes model, or we call that the SLAM model. And then we looked at potential storm surge inundation areas from Category 2 hurricanes into the year 2100 with those risen sea level scenarios. And that was using the ADCIRC and simulating waves nearshore model. And then we estimated socioeconomic impacts from these increased storm surges using the ASCE model. And so here in this slide, we can see the coast-wide results from the SLAM model. And into the year 2100 with no action taken, we can see an increase by 30% in open water, a reduction by 37% in beaches, an increase in 27% in estuarine wetlands. However, that's seen to be at the expense of freshwater wetlands, of which we see a reduction of 52%. So the socioeconomic impacts of the increase in these storm surges in the year 2100 was examined in our ASCE modeling results. And the graph on the right shows both the increase in the number of buildings damaged, as well as the cost of damage compared to the scenario run at the present day landscape. So with no action taken, the modeled Category 2 storm striking the Beaumont Port Arthur area, we can see a 589% increase in damaged buildings, and that results in a $13.3 billion increase in damages. So real quick to just take a look at some of the modeling conclusions. We are able to conclude that today's wetlands are going to be lost due to relative sea level rise if these habitats are not allowed to transition upland. And this, of course, is going to decrease our ecosystem resiliency and increase the vulnerability of our natural and built environments. And if no mitigating actions are taken, our coastal communities are going to become more vulnerable to these minor hurricanes because of relative sea level rise and those land cover changes associated with sea level rise into the future. And that's going to allow storm surge to penetrate further inland. And so we can also conclude that ecosystem conservation and restoration projects coupled with responsible development are going to be very important and critical facets for increasing our overall resiliency. And those are goals that our resiliency master plan are attempting to work toward. So taking a closer look at the progress of Tier 1 projects in the Upper Coast, or Region 1 as we call it in our planning process, out of those 49 Tier 1 projects in Region 1, 28 are currently in progress, and 7 of those have been recently initiated or have taken their first steps since the issuance of the 2019 plan about 18 months ago. So I'll leave that graphic up just for a minute there so you can kind of see the location of these projects, and we're about to dive in a bit deeper on specific projects and some of the progress that we've seen so far. So here you can see in table format those 28 projects that are currently in progress in Region 1. And the recently initiated projects are highlighted in orange there. And so here's some a summarization of some project updates that the GLO is not directly involved in as much. And then I'll launch into some of the projects that the GLO is more involved in. So over there at Willow Lake along the Gulf Intercoastal Waterway, Project R12, that's slated for construction in the near future. The Salt Bayou Siphon Project R141 is estimated to have been completed by this point. We'll have to check in and get another update on that. The Coastal Heritage Preserve on Galveston Island, Project R135, is being driven by an organization known as Artist Boat. And they have a willing seller, and they're actively working on acquiring 120 acres in Anchor Bay. It's going to bring the total acreage of conserved land to 810 acres in the Coastal Heritage Preserve. The East and West Galveston Bay Watershed, Wetland, and Habitat Conservation Project, R139, has multiple target acquisitions that are in progress or have been completed. Project R116, Dollar Bay Wetland Creation and Acquisition. Construction is anticipated to start in the second half of 2020 on some breakwaters and living shorelines. The land acquisition associated with this project is going to provide an opportunity to extend the wetland protection and creation portion of the project into the future, should funding continue to be secured. and those nearshore breakwaters could be extended 2,000 to about 2,300 feet in front of the newly acquired property. And looking at the levee improvement projects, the Sabine to Galveston study that the Army Corps of Engineers completed, the Orange County levee system is in the engineering and design phase, while the Port Arthur and Freeport levee systems are entering into the construction phase. So now taking a look closer at the projects, or the projects and the actions associated with those outlined for Region 1. I'd like you to know that Region 1 was split into Region 1A and 1B to group these projects more relevantly to the populations in those areas. And splitting this region up into 1A and 1B has also helped with ease of travel and once again, concentration on some more sub-regional specific type considerations. So let's just take a look here at the update on some of the projects that GLO has been directly involved in implementing. So we can see through the action polygon there, the thatched orange area, grouping of projects calling for infrastructure improvements in the Beaumont Port Arthur area, such as drainage studies and improvements and roadway elevations. And we can see through the green polygon there around Bessie Heights, wetland protection and shoreline stabilization actions. And right now, to report on Project R16, the Texas NERDA trustees are currently working with TPWD Lower Neches Wildlife Management Area on this Bessie Heights project to restore marsh using beneficial use of dredge material from the nearby Sabine Neches Waterway federal channel. And then the CEPRA program at the GLO is partnering with Ducks Unlimited to construct 6.7 miles of living shoreline along Anahuac National Wildlife Refuge down in the bottom left-hand corner, Project R11. Another grouping of projects serve to improve hydrologic connectivity of the wetlands in the Salt Bayou system through projects such as the Ducks Unlimited partner CEPRA project that replaces the Star Lake water control structure in Project R142. Excuse me. The beach and dune sustainability action seen along the Gulf facing shoreline there in red, that's going to be accomplished over time through the project you just heard Kelly talking about at McFaddin. Kelly and Jolynn both presented on that one, as well as the Texas Point Beach Nourishment Project. And those projects are respectively R119 and R121. And those are going to bring about, once again, that beach and dune sustainability action for the Gulf facing shoreline in Region 1A. Looking at Region 1B, we can see the large-scale action associated with oyster reef enhancement in Galveston Bay, and then the wetland protection and shoreline stabilization actions outlined in green along the GIWW in West Bay and along the Brazoria National Wildlife Refuge, farther to the west. Some shoreline projects of note that CEPRA is involved in this region include final design and construction of 9,000 feet of breakwaters along Trinity Bay as part of the Gordy Marsh Protection and Restoration Project, R14, just off the map there to the right side. CEPRA is also working on the permitting and construction of 7,500 feet of breakwaters on the bay side of Galveston Island State Park that is largely funded through the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation. That's Project R114. And CEPRA is also working on 11,000 feet of breakwaters to protect a breach of the Oyster Lake shoreline on the west side of West Galveston Bay, Project R117. NERDA trustee projects in Region 1B include Greens Lake Shoreline Protection and Wetland Restoration, that's Project R115. The shoreline protection portion of the project is funded by National Fish and Wildlife Foundation and is in the early engineering phase in collaboration between Ducks Unlimited and Galveston Bay Foundation. The wetland restoration portion is included in the Restore Act funded portion of the project to develop a marsh restoration project through beneficial use of dredge material. Beach and dune sustainability actions along Galveston and Falls Island will be incrementally accomplished through various ongoing projects and studies, including a project to construct a groin and beach along Surfside Beach and a feeder beach along Falls Island in Project R123. There's also a beach nourishment project at Delanera Park at the west end of Galveston Seawall, Project R122. Then we can see little islands of yellow there. Those yellow highlighted areas show actions where Rookery Island enhancement has been identified as a need. And then once again, you can see outlined in gray those Sabine to Galveston levee improvement projects visible, and the one there, project R149 in Freeport. And those three levee improvement projects in Region 1 push the project cost total in this region to the highest of the 4 regions across the coast. You can see there, just with those 3 storm risk management projects, they total $3.9 billion in funds needed. So as I said, we have issued 2 iterations of our plan in the past, 2017 and 2019. We're going to be moving into a 4-year planning cycle now, and the next iteration of the Texas Coastal Resiliency Master Plan will be released in 2023. In the meantime, we're focused on implementation efforts that include engaging more stakeholders, educating through the development of various tools that work to empower coastal communities, residents, and industries. And once again, we're just continuing to try to expand the scope of this planning effort to, once again, help drive priorities and help inform priorities of other agencies, working collaboratively with agencies such as TxDOT, Texas Water Development Board, and others to be sure that we can align our goals and priorities and begin to understand where we as a state can boost resiliency into the future. You can find all of our planning documents, technical reports. We have some really cool project maps, modeling data viewers. Those are very popular. You look at those per region, and you can toggle on and off different layers. You can look at those action polygons, take a look at project footprints in those, and look at our expected sea level rise, landscape change, and storm surge inundation areas into the year 2100 on those modeling data viewers. And you can find all this at the really easy address, glo.texas.gov/CRMP, standing for Coastal Resiliency Master Plan. And here's my contact information if anyone would like to get in touch with me. I know we're all working from home these days, or many of us are. My phone number is forwarded to my cell phone, so I should get your call. I welcome your emails, calls, and I'd like to keep speaking with everyone on how we can improve our planning process. And if you'd like to stay involved, just please let me know, and I can take any questions we might have now.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Josh. Great presentation, and always excited to see what's going on with the Coastal Resiliency Master Plan. So like Josh said, we do have a little bit of time here for questions. We did receive a few on the previous projects, or the previous presentations, but if anyone's got a question for Josh they want to enter right now, we'll give them a chance to answer those first. And then we can move on to the McFaddin project and back to Port of Beaumont as well. Josh, at this moment, I'm not seeing any, so we can always cycle back to you if we get any coming in. But again, thank you very much. Great presentation, and appreciate your time and the information today.
Thanks a lot.
All right. So Kelly and Jolene, I hope you're still on the line. We did have two questions come in for the McFaddin project presentation. So the first one, and I apologize ahead of time if I mispronounce any names. But the first question is from Jacob Chaco. And the question is, are you planning to build any grow-ins to help retain the sand?
Kelly, do you want to answer?
Sure. Well, I know that, Philip, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think our eastern neighbor, Louisiana, has some groins offshore of maybe the Holly Beach area, or is it further west? And we were looking at, if we're going back and after doing the pilot project and doing a preliminary design, because we had a bunch of different funding sources that required us to go back and look at, investigating every possible venue. And so we did have a period where we talked about doing some offshore breakwaters and or groins, kind of like you'd see further downshore at Galveston. So we decided that because we would be doing 20 miles of actual beach nourishment, that adding a shoreline stabilization structure as offshore breakwaters and or groins would would be complementary, but it would also be extremely expensive, and so it was a little bit cost prohibitive. But I think the idea is to actually, we're talking about 20 miles of beach and shoreline that is so degraded that you have clay. So I think that the idea is that we're going to nourish the beach and do the dune restoration, and then as funds come in and we can monitor what actually happens post placement, then we can think about designing some infrastructure like offshore breakwaters or groins that are going to create those cells that'll trap that sand inside of those cells and be more beneficial. But as for right now, it was just a little bit too much to do all of that at the same time. I hope that answers your question.
Great, thanks Kelly and Jolynn. And we do have one more so far on the McFaddin project. So Brandon Hill asked, he said, we heard Kelly and Jolynn talk about the great turn nest response following the nourishment. What was the window of recovery for other critical species in the area, such as the infauna?
Such as the what?
The infauna.
Oh, so like the fauna? Well, we really only had biological monitoring occur through demobilization, and so and then we had monitoring that is just topographic and bathymetric monitoring that happens yearly. So we're not actually out there recording, data of what other species are going on at this point in time, other than getting glimpses of, going out there and seeing if, other birds are habitating the dunes. What do the dunes look like? What does the beach look like? How is it holding up? And we do have, we showed that one picture that showed you that the beach width is holding up pretty well. The dune is holding up pretty high. So I envision that we don't have turtles coming in yet. We know that they exist because a couple of dead ones washed up on shore during the project, but we don't think that they're obviously using the area yet for any kind of nesting. They're probably just taking the current highway around down to South Padre Island and passing by. But we think that the area is obviously being used by bird species for nesting, any kind of low-lying nesting species that inhabit dune kind of areas and things like that, and lots of plants and just native beach plants instead of marsh plants are actually becoming pretty prevalent along that area.
Great, thanks Kelly. So for now, that's all the questions I'm showing on the McFaddin project. I'm going to hand it back over to Robin for a second. We had a question come in for the Port of Beaumont presentation, but we still have a few minutes if anyone else wants to add something before we close out here. But Robin, it's all yours.
Thanks, Philip. A question came in from Jacob Chaco on the Propelling Growth presentation. This question is, what is the dredge depth? Brandon, could you speak to the current dredge depth there and then the proposed?
Yes, so the dredge depth that we maintain at our docks in order to have safe underkeel clearance and anticipated drafts of vessels visiting the port really varies across our facility. Those docks at the southern reach of the port are all maintained to a depth of minus 40 feet, mean low water. As you begin to work your way up from the turning basin at Beaumont, some of our older facilities just north side of that peninsula are maintained to a depth of minus 38 feet. And then on up to the new property that I mentioned being very shallow and heavy sedimentation after Harvey, that's going to be dredged down to a depth of minus 18 feet. All those reflect our currently permitted dredge depths, with the exception of our two newest docks at the port. One of that being our general cargo wharf at the Orange County Terminal, It has been designed to a depth of -50. And then our new dock that we are currently working to rebuild right now, the one that I mentioned had collapsed in 2011. That one also has been designed to a depth of -50. So as we anticipate the deepening of the channel to a depth of -48 feet, we're trying to figure out which of these older docks can accommodate some amount of additional dredge depth without compromising the capacity of the structure. And if we want to get it down to that, to maximize vessel draft at the docks with that deeper channel, what might we have to do to modify the docks to see that deeper depth?
Thank you, Brandon. That was all the questions I had seen that came in for the Port of Beaumont. I guess with that, I'd like to thank all the presenters for coming and great presentations, and I'll pass it back on over to Joseph.
Yes, good afternoon, everybody, and just to have a few closing remarks before we conclude the meeting. And once again, just thank you to everybody for attending the August quarterly meeting for Texas COPRI. We appreciate everyone's involvement with the chapter. And as Robin said, a big thank you to our presenters today. We appreciate your time, and we enjoyed learning more about your current and upcoming projects. Just a side note, if you would like a PDA certificate for this meeting, please send an email to COPRI@ascehouston.org. That's COPRI at ascehouston.org, and we will send you a PDF certificate. We have a few upcoming events that you will hopefully consider attending. These are most likely going to be virtual events upcoming. So our next quarterly meeting is scheduled for November 10th, 2020. And our Texas COPRI Fall Conference, we are going to hold that on October 1st, 2020, and most likely that will be a virtual half-day go-to webinar. But that's why we set out that poll to try to gauge everyone's interest. And with that, we will conclude the meeting. And once again, thank you for attending today's meeting.